Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kieran. I help people using a spiritual perspective. We're going to talk about suffering today. There's a lot of suffering going on in the world. There's a lot of suffering going on in your life, probably. And there's just so much suffering. There's a lot of it. Almost too much. Almost makes you wonder, why do we suffer? And what is the point? Now, there's an old Buddhist saying that says something along the lines of, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but it says that suffering is necessary until you realize that it isn't. Okay, I think that's how the quote goes, but there could be different variations of that. So the idea is that we come to an understanding about suffering. And so, we want to understand, well, what is that? What is that realization? What is suffering? Right? And suffering is something that happens when you don't choose your pain. And enlightenment is what happens when you do. Enlightenment is that healing. When you choose your pain, you are healing, right? Because you're no longer going to run away from whatever it is you're experiencing that's pain. You're going to heal it, which means you have to choose it. Just with an injury, if you get an injury and let's just say it's a sprained ankle or something, and you don't rest, of course you're going to make it worse. You're not choosing that experience. You're choosing, well, I can't sit all day, you can't rest, you can't take a break. If you don't heal, then you're not choosing your pain. And that's a physical example, but same thing with emotional or spiritual, with the things that are going on in our life. You have to choose your experience. So when you heal, you stop sort of checking on the wound or peeling off the Band-Aid. A lot of people do that with lovers or relationships that have ended. A lot of people will go check. Maybe they'll go 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks without checking on someone's Instagram or Facebook or whatever the fuck people use, and probably Snapchat or TikTok these days. And and then it sort of just reopens the wound, doesn't it? It doesn't really heal anything. So healing is what happens when you choose to actually experience the pain. But you have to choose it. So from a philosophical and spiritual perspective, choosing our pain is a very powerful element of choice and freedom. Because there's a lot of things that we suffer for in the world. And there's people that are going through insurmountable odds at the moment. It's very easy to look at a situation that you're in and go like, well, I'm suffering. And then there's other people who are like suffering in other kinds of ways that you don't have to deal with. So on one hand, you can be grateful. On the other hand, I don't want, of course you shouldn't feel like your suffering isn't as important as anybody's suffering. But the idea is there's a lot of suffering that goes on that you really can't choose. And a good, very legitimate example of that would be the war in the Ukraine, all right? Or any, of course, war going on in the world, or any kind of a system or governmental system or society or class structure that is just fundamentally more flawed than would exist in, let's say, North America, right? So, there's a lot of things going on in the world. I think there's a lot of like Chinese killing Muslims. There's a lot of Muslims dying. There's a lot of different kinds of killings going on in the world, mass shootings, right? There's a lot of let's just say negativity, or there's a lot of experiences that are painful that happen in the world, and they happen to unsuspecting people. And so whether or not, if you're caught up in a war between two ideologies, or you're gunned down, or your family member is gunned down in some shopping center, there's a lot of pain and suffering that goes along with that. So it's you can't choose things like that, right? But so much of the suffering that we do endure is it is something that you can choose not to. Right? You can actually choose not to for much of it, right? Even recently, a big theme that's coming up for me is letting go of people, or letting go of the emotions associated with the people that let me down. And one of the big things about my personality, or just who I am, is that I don't I don't really tolerate, or I really don't like it, a pet peeve, I guess you'd say, when people don't respect my time. So if I make a plan with somebody and it's like canceled, and it's like that kind of bothers me, Now, I'm not like an asshole about it. I'm not gonna like rage, things happen. It's not that I've never canceled on anybody, of course, right? But the point is that I honor my commitments to the best of the ability that I can. And when it comes to like friends and stuff like that, if we're going to meet up or they say you're going to come and then they don't, what happens is, because I'm kind of an easygoing guy and I let things slide a lot, it builds up. Right? It'll build up and then they do it again, or it happens. And so what happens is, I'll end up having friends in my life because of that attitude of mine, which is almost too easygoing. And essentially, people will walk all over me, so to speak. So they'll take my time for granted and take advantage of me in some kind of sense. And then, of course, that builds up. There will be a resentment that builds up, and you may be like me in this case. And of course, that's no good. It's no good for you. So you start to suffer as a result. You start to suffer from the anger or the resentment or the pity, or feeling like, oh, my friends, they don't give a shit, they don't like this, it's like I need better friends. And then you start thinking, well, I don't have those better friends. And you can go in all kinds of thought processes, right? But the idea is that you start to suffer. You start to suffer from almost a very simple thing, but you begin to suffer over time, because suffering is pain plus time, right? That's really what suffering is. So, you could suffer through an hour, suffer through a day, suffer through a week, right? But suffering is a continuous process. So you begin to suffer, it builds up. It's like a kind of a darkness inside, and just keeps kind of growing, right? And it festers, and it's a wound, essentially. And you can't heal because you don't feel like you're choosing the pain. You don't feel like you've chosen the experience. So you just suffer. So it's just something that's painful or uncomfortable, which is fine, normal, completely normal thing to have and experience, and we all should. But if you, beyond that, if you let it go, it becomes suffering. Let it go in the sense that you don't take care of it, not let it go as in release the burden. Though that is obviously good advice. So when it comes to things like in the situation I'm talking about, it's not that I attract that into my life. Nobody attracts those types of people. It's more about letting it happen, right? So if you allow something to happen like that continuously over time, if that's a pattern within your relationships or your connections, then you're allowing something to happen like that, right? So it's not necessarily you're attracting people like that to reflect how you feel, because there's tons of people that I've met that do honor my commitments. But it's a theme in my life when it comes to having to let go of certain friends and certain things that have, been a theme, right? So you have to learn to choose the pain. So in this particular example, not suffering is now choosing for this not to be a problem, right? It's saying, you know what, I already knew this was going to happen, because oftentimes you just kind of know, and then you just feel like it's not worth it. Like it's not worth the suffering of putting yourself through it. It's not worth it because you realize you can choose not to participate in it. You don't have to feel shitty about it. You don't have to blame yourself. You don't have to blame anybody. You just look at the situation and you go, well, that's not cool. There is an element of pain. There's something there that is uncomfortable. That's normal. But what that is has nothing to do with me. That exists on its own. And it existed before I was there, and it will exist after I'm gone, right? So, for instance, it's not my issue that people wouldn't respect my time. It's my issue that I would put up with it. Do you understand? So once that becomes the realization, the suffering is obviously just a choice. And there's no point in putting yourself through so much pain. So that was just sort of my example, but there's going to be tons of examples that you'll have in your own life, and maybe that is similar to mine, where you just are just putting up with things that is causing you pain. This is all shit that we make ourselves do, that we put ourselves through, that ultimately, by the end of the day, it's like, did we ever have time for ourselves? Because most of our time seems to be spent in suffering. I mean, you think of it as a species, most of our time is spent suffering. 1 minute to the next, people are just suffering. There's like these brief moments of peace sometimes, these brief moments of happiness, accomplishments, pride, But most of us are just like, wow, we're tired, we're exhausted, we're burnt out. Things are getting more expensive. People have less money. There's housing issues. There's social divides. Doesn't really seem to be a middle class anymore. The economy. Assume I said something intelligent about the economy, and all of these sort of social problems or crime or any of the movements or ideas or the culture wars or any of the stuff that exists within our society, all of it, people are just taking on themselves. Men hate women, women hate men. People hate Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter hates, all lives matter. All lives matter hate these people. These people hate those other people. Liberals hate the far right, and the far right conservatives hate liberals, and woke people hate these people, and people hate woke people, and everybody hates everything and each other, and we're all just filled with suffering. Everybody's just suffering. They're suffering from things that have nothing to do with them. Something somebody said, suffering. Things people say online, you start to suffer. You start to go, you write a comment while you're taking a shit or whatever, and you're on your phone in the bathroom, and you're arguing with somebody online, and you're like, what is this? What the hell am I doing? And people are just doing that. You look on comments, it's just people arguing with each other. They'll never convince anybody of anything most of the time, and there's no point. It's just a waste of energy, and yet people just take on that anger and that frustration and the impatience. And it doesn't go anywhere, So there's so much that you can think of that causes people to suffer. The mail is late, Why does my mail come at 6 p.m. every day? It's what the fuck is that, But it does. It comes at like 6 p.m. every day here. I've never had mail come that late. But who cares? I guess this isn't 1987. But still, there's the idea that it's like you could take on that suffering. Why is my mail not here? This is bullshit, And because you're waiting for something, or you get something through the mail, a check, or whatever it may be. So you start to suffer. And everything, even the things that you think are so super important to worry about. Money's a huge one. And you suffer because of it. You suffer because you don't have enough, or you have to spend it, or you're not making enough, or you're not making it fast enough, or it's not this kind of money, it's cash. It's not like through a direct deposit or through something, or it's direct deposit, it's not cash. Money makes tons of people suffer for all the reasons that I just mentioned, and probably some I haven't. And you think that it's something that's totally in your control, but it's not. A lot of it just isn't, because you're not responsible for the economy. You're not responsible for the lack of, let's just say the money that your family had or that they grew up with. Or you're not responsible for X, Y, and Z. There's tons of things that are within our personal power, right? But a lot of it isn't. Like 80% of it really just isn't. And we're suffering like 80% of the time. So we have a responsibility to our higher selves, to who we really are, to stop taking on so much suffering, to stop letting every little thing get to us, because it's not important. It doesn't matter. And you can't start to heal. You can't become enlightened if that's what your spiritual goal is, if you're even going to treat it as a goal. You can't experience that by taking on everybody and everything's pain. You can't do that. You're just going to suffer. You have to really just decide that, well, I'm going to choose what matters. I'm going to choose the pain. I'll choose the pain of my experience, And when you feel like it's your choice, it's not painful anymore. And then it just is what it is, actually. And you just know that you're going to do it. A good example of that would be my music, or any of the things that I do, really. YouTube, right? I don't make these videos to get paid. Nobody's paying me to make these. Nobody gives a shit, I mean, some of you might care, but it's not like I have 10,000 subs or 100,000 subs. There's plenty of people that are more popular and probably wiser than me, and they have lots of support and lots of people, and they probably make lots of money. This is not really like one of those situations, Sure, I do coaching. Sure, I do the tarot readings and stuff like that, but this is not like I'm making like money from this. You know what I mean? I'm not like, I can't afford anything with the money I make on YouTube. Like I can buy like coffee and or maybe like a dinner or something sometimes. But the idea is I never started this spiritual channel to necessarily make money. I did it because I felt like I had something to say. I felt like I wanted to talk about what I wanted to say, and I hoped that it would help some people. So those are my reasons. So if I ever do find myself kind of complaining about the lack of attention that this channel might be receiving, I also think, what does that have to do with me? Why should I take on that suffering? It's too much. It's not even about practical advice or not practical advice. The point is that I can't take on the suffering of what might happen or what might not happen or what isn't happening. All I can do if I care about it is choose the pain. Is it worth it to just keep on making videos? Yes. Is it worth it for me to keep on making music even if I never, ever, ever become some famous musician or what? Yes, it is. Is it worth it to write? Yes. Why? Because I like doing it, I want to do it, and because it will help others. That's the only reason. And then you choose it. You're choosing it now. But if you ask those questions, those three basic questions, do I want to do it? Even do I want to do it? Will I do it anyway? And is it worth doing? Is it going to help somebody? Is it worth doing? Is it worth talking about? And do I want to do it? Right? So do I want to make music? Yes. Is it worth doing? Yeah. Am I going to do it anyway? Yeah. Is it going to help people? Yeah. Right? So you got to ask yourself these kind of important questions. And you find out, okay, I'm suffering for no reason. Or you find out, yeah, I can choose this pain. This pain's worth it to me, right? So suffering is is something that we really need to, as a species, phase ourselves out of in a personal sort of way. Otherwise, I think at that point, you don't really experience joy anymore. And that'll definitely be a topic for another day.